In this video, we're going to look at animation for games. Unlike ordinary animation, we see a sequence of movement in a scene, and we move on to the next scene, and we see some different movement, and it's usually all kind of created largely as sort of one-off bits of movement in a sequence. Whereas with games, what we get are often short sequences like a walk or a run or a jump that are used over and over again. With Blender, what we can do is we can create a little library of these kind of animations, and it's referred to as nonlinear animation. The idea being that these are nonlinear, they don't always appear in the order in which you make them, or they can be called upon by a game engine to play at any given time. To set this up, we have to do a little bit of rearrangement of the screen. The first thing I'm going to do is down here where I've got my animation timeline. I'm going to just bring that up a little bit. If you can't see another window down here, you can easily make a new one by holding your cursor in the corner of an existing screen until you see the cross cursor appear. Click and drag downwards, and you'll see that splits the view into two. If you want to join them up again, hover over the middle part and you can right click and choose join areas like that. Having got the timeline down here to a useful size where we can view it, I'm going to switch it from the timeline to the dope sheet in this animation column. It doesn't look that different. It doesn't look that different at this stage. However, we can change it from dope sheet to the action editor, and that's where we want to be. The other thing I like to do is have another window below this, and in this case we switch it from the dope sheet or action editor to the non-linear animation window. And again, it's a little confusing because they do look very, very similar. You'll notice though, obviously it says action editor here. You can obviously see the icons are different, and the main visual difference really is this big button here that says new in the action editor, and this is what we're going to press next. So for every bit of animation we make, we need to store it in a new action. So to begin, we press new, and I'm going to keep it very simple for this video, but you can apply lots of different actions to yours and make them more and more complicated. So for example, I could begin by perhaps doing a wave. For that, I'm going to use one of the arms, this one here, and I'm going to go into pose mode. So I've selected the armature and gone into pose mode. I need a starting point for the wave. So for that, I'm going to just bend and twist some of these bones. So you can see I'm going to press R and X. That's going to go like that. And you see the hands in a bit of a dodgy position there. So I'm going to press R and Z now, just to twist that around like that. And I'm going to say that's the starting point for my hand. And just to add a little bit more movement, I'm going to just bend it at the wrist as well, R and X. So it's going to be sort of that way. Perhaps let's go a bit more with that arm, R and X, something like that. When I'm in that starting position here, I'm just going to select these bones. I'm going to press B, click and drag over these bones that I've moved. I'm not doing anything with the bones I haven't moved. And then with my cursor over the 3D viewport, I press the I key. This brings up the keyframe menu. And the property I want to keyframe is rotation. I haven't changed anything else, I've just changed the rotation like that, and you'll see that leaves a keyframe here. It's also added some bits and pieces here, which we'll come to shortly, and it has given this the name Armature 001 Action. We need to change this because that's not a very useful name when we're looking at a list of actions. So this I'm going to call Wave. So we've got our starting point, we've given it a name. And now I'm just going to move the timeline on a little bit, quite arbitrarily, to 20 frames. I'm doing this in the action editor. Then I'm going to select this bone here again, and this time press R and X, and bring that down, like that. And I might just also R and X on the wrist there. And again, just press B and select the bones that I've moved, and then I and R, or I and rotation. And you'll see now that when I go back and forth in the timeline, it creates a wave. It's a good idea to make sequences loop so that they end where they begin. This creates quite a nice smooth movement rather than a jolty kind of thing where a hand is waving and then suddenly it's doing something else. So in order to loop this, we need to come to the action editor. At the moment, this keyframe and this keyframe are both orange, which indicates that they're highlighted. So just like in the 3D viewport, I'm going to double tap A, I'm going to select this first keyframe, and I'm going to press Shift and D and move it along. And you can see I've got 20 frames between the first two, and then I'll make 20 frames between the second two. And you'll see now that it goes back to its original position. So that is my first action. In order to store this in the NLA editor, we need to press this button here. So having made sure that we've named it so it's not got some daft name, press push down. And you'll see in the NLA editor we've got wave here. You can also see that having pushed that down, our action editor is empty again, ready for us to make a new action. So we're going to press new. Before we begin this new action, we need to remove the transforms that we've done here. Don't worry, it is stored in here. So we choose pose, clear transform and all, and that should reset it to its original pose. We can make a new action. We could do a walk, and obviously this is a little more complicated. So we can begin our walk by setting a first pose. If it helps, obviously change your view so you can see clearly what's going on. And it's a good idea if you're doing a walk cycle, have a look at some pictures of walk cycles that are relevant to whatever you're making. So people, obviously, animals. There are lots of different examples of walk cycles for different types of things that walk out there on the internet. So have a little look. But I'll do a very generic walk cycle here. So I'm just going to rotate this leg out a bit. And again, just working my way from the inside out. You can see here that the leg is not behaving very well, and that's because as I've rotated this, I've not given it an axis to rotate in. So it's doing some kind of river dance move. So I'll just undo that, and I'll be a bit more precise. So R and Y, there we go. And then R and Y on that bone, and you'll see this time it's not crossing over and it's actually going where I want. So do be careful and pay attention to where these bones are going, because you can go wrong quite easily. And here I'm just going to select these two bones and press R and Y, and that will help me just tilt the foot a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to go with something like that for my starting point. So I need to keyframe these bones. Not only that, because I'm going to move this leg here as well, I need to keyframe these bones. So just press B and make a box selection around those bones. Press I and rotation. Having keyframed this first pose, it's time to do the second. So what we do is we move the timeline on a little way and we put the legs into a new position. So I'm just going to put this leg, move it around a little. So it's poking out the front, ready to step on the ground. Again, just being careful about where I'm rotating it. And this leg here is going to come back a little. Like that. And I'll just tilt it as well, R and Y, like so. And again, because we've moved various bones here, I'm going to press B, select all the ones that I've moved, not worrying about the ones that I haven't moved, and press I and rotation, and we can just look through that. There, it may be that you want to adjust things, in which case I think I'd quite like that leg to come up higher. So I'm just going to choose this bone here, and then R and Y. Like that. And again, Just to update my keyframes, I highlight them and press I and rotation. So now we can see, there we go. I'll move it on a few more frames. And so now this foot will be on the ground. You can see I'm not actually moving the mesh along, I'm moving the bones in place. This is because in the game you will have something that moves the entire character around and simply plays the correct animation for the time. Okay, so that foot's flat on the floor, whereas this one is going to come off the floor. Okay, and then I'll press B, highlight them, I and rotation, and we can have, again, have a little look at that. Okay, and so now it's time for this leg to go back, R and Y, like so. Something like that. Obviously you can take more time over the movement than I'm doing. R and Y to bring that out the front here. R and Y has been picked up there. I think I went a little higher, didn't I, with the other leg in the end. They don't have to be massive movements. Okay, and just select those and press I and rotation. Have another little look. And just have a look where we started. You can see that that foot is on the floor, that foot's raised back, and that is what's supposed to happen next. So to make it loop, I'm going to duplicate this first frame again. I do need to make sure that I've got all of the bones that I want to duplicate selected, otherwise I'll end up with just copying these bones here. So I'll press B, highlight all of those. Down here in the action editor, I'll just double tap A to deselect all of the keyframes so that I can press B and just choose the one that I want. Shift and D and move that along to the frame that I need it on. There we go. And with any luck now, we should have something like a walk cycle. If you want to test your walk cycle and see how it actually looks when going, we could quickly come over to the output settings here and choose the end frame that our animation ends on. So in my case 40. Here instead of 250, I'll change that to 40. And if I press space, it does that little cycle. It's waving as it goes as well, because we've got the one animation happening on top of the other. So it's a bit robotic, but hopefully you get the idea and you can spend more time making it smoother. Once you're happy with your animation, make sure you have named it, and we press push down, and if we have a closer look at the bottom of the screen here, we can see the action editor is empty again, and this here has now got a walk track. We can turn off these animations from view just by unticking them here and here, and hopefully now it doesn't move any further. However, with them turned off, you can see that they no longer move, but they are still in a position. So I'm just going to press A and select all the bones and choose pose and clear transform. Hopefully now it gives us a nice fresh pose to start with, and we can do further animation. So now it's over to you. Think about the different animations your game character needs to perform and make an action for each one, obviously with a unique name, and try and make it loop. So there we go. Obviously not all of our characters are human. We can do exactly the same process with other characters, such as this creature here. Again, have a look at how these creatures move, how they walk, and if it helps, do some little sketches to plan out your movement. So let's say I want to animate the head going up and down. I might choose to use this bone here. So let's select all the bones I'm going to move. These here, and I'm going to put these, this is the starting position. so I'm going to record that as a keyframe. Note obviously that we're still using the action editor here, which is the dope sheet, and then switch it to the action editor mode. And down here we've got another window, which is the nonlinear animation window. So I'll create a new action. This one is going to be called head nod, perhaps. It's going up and down. And I will, having selected these bones, press I in the 3D viewport and choose rotation. That sets a keyframe. I will choose frame 20. Again, it's an idea to have a look at how fast or slow these creatures move and try and get your timing right. So first I'll start with that bone and I'll work my way down like so. And then using B, select those bones that I've just moved and press I and get the rotation stored. So just as I did before with the humanoid, I'm going to select this frame here by double tapping A to deselect them all. Just clicking on this keyframe here and pressing Shift and D and moving that along to its new position. So I've evenly spaced them, and you'll see now that it goes up and down and then back to its original position. Once we're happy with our short little sequence, we can push it down. We can also stash it as well. Pushing it down makes it immediately visible, whereas stashing it, if I press stash, you'll see that it's recorded it in the nonlinear animation editor, and I can actually do things with it. I can copy it and watch it. As I go over it with the playhead here, it's not affecting the actual mesh, and it means that we can get straight on with the next bit of animation. If you do want to look at it, we can just tick this here and you can see that going there. Obviously with the walk cycle with your creature, it has more legs than a person and so can be trickier. And again, it all depends on the creature. Obviously a dinosaur might move differently to a lion or something like that, So just think about how your character will move, and you can create that by rotating these. Don't forget, if you're rotating, R and X will trap it in that particular axis and mean that your legs aren't going all over the shop. So I can set I'll just do a very general cycle here. So R and X on that back leg here. And I can just spin around there so that I can then work my way down the leg. R and then X. And we probably lift the foot up a little more. Like that. Perhaps this one reflects it a little better. There we go. So something like that maybe. And perhaps actually lift it off the ground. They probably don't lift their knees too high. And once we're happy with that initial pose, if you want to, it might make it a little easier. You can just press A and then I and record the rotation for all the bones. It doesn't really hurt. It might be a little bit much information, but it's better than not enough. And then I will just move these bones back into place, back onto the ground. And I'll lift the others up. So like I say, keeping this very, very simple. You might like to look at some good reference images to help you with the actual movement here. Okay, I think that will do. I'll press A again and I and keyframe the rotation. You can have a little look through there. Again, I'll just double tap A in the action editor here, double tap A to deselect the keyframes. I'll press B so that I can just drag and select over that, Shift and D, and I'll take that to 20 there, and we can see that that goes back and forth, and conceivably we could use that for our creature's walk. Once we're happy, give it a name and stick it in the stash. There we go, and then you can crack on with the next animation. If you've got a kind of hangover position or pose here, provided that you've stashed these things and you're happy that they're secure, you can go to pose, clear transform and all, and that will reset you ready for the next bit of animation. So have a go at making the different animations for your creature, stashing them, and of course saving your file.